Hey folks, and welcome to a video on the Planet Zach YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you my experience when I tried the Classic Sonic Simulator on Roblox. It's basically a game where you get to play classic style Sonic stages, some of which you can create your own and play stages made by other players. It's super cool. So this here is the test stage. There are 2 acts for the test stage. This is Act 1. It took me a while to figure out that you actually use the D-pad to move. I couldn't get the menu to work, and I tried to bring up my cursor and ended up in the test stage. And then I spent like a good solid minute or 2 not being able to do anything because I didn't know how to move. But I figured out that it is the D-pad that allows you to move left or right. I'm playing, I believe, as Sonic 1 Sonic, because he doesn't have the spin dash. The elemental shields have been introduced in this game, and it looks like they function pretty much the same as they do in the classic games or in Sonic Mania. So this is the lightning shield that allows you to have a bit of a double jump when you press the A button mid-jump. And there's also the bubble shield, which allows you to breathe underwater and bounce, and the fire shield, which gives you an air dash effect and protects you from flames. So pretty cool. I keep dying at this part whenever I play this test level. I don't know if there's supposed to be something down here, but basically I land on the bottom, and then when I try to get back to the other side and try to get out of the water, I hit a death plane and it kills me. So I don't know if there's something that's supposed to load in there, or if it's just literally a bottomless pit and it just only has a death plane on one side. I don't know what the deal is there. But overall, the test stage is a good introduction to classic Sonic mechanics and how they work in this particular game. It's pretty fun for the first act. The second act's a little bit different, and we'll get to that when we go into the second act, but overall the first act, I think, does a pretty good job of running you through the mechanics of the game. Here you see I've got the bubble shield, I'm bouncing around, and if I go into water, I'll be able to breathe underwater, but there's no water right now. But there is actually water in this level, so you even get used to the water mechanics, which I think are based on Sonic 1's water mechanics. They're not the best water mechanics the series has seen. They're pretty sluggish, and I personally have always dreaded water levels, especially Sonic 1's Labyrinth, which really, I think that particular stage is a little bit made worse by just the amount of things that are trying to kill you or make you lose your rings. It's a whole lot at once, and you're dealing with the water, and I can see why it's a later stage in the game, even though it kind of breaks up the progression, and it's really challenging. But this is not too bad. There is a callback to the whole section of Chemical Plant from Sonic 2, which you'll see when I get to the actual water section, and it's not that bad. Of course, I've never personally had a lot of trouble with that section, but I know a lot of people do. And you can see we've got the pinball mechanics, which they'll really get into those in Act 2 of this test zone. I will say, for a test zone, this is a pretty sizable stage. It took me a few tries to get all the way through, and it goes on for a long time, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I think we're used to the first stage or the test stage of most games being like super simple, to the point where you normally don't even go back and play it on subsequent plays, because it's like, well, it's just the test zone, you know? Like, I always thought Windmill Isle in the Xbox 360 version of Sonic Unleashed was super short, especially compared to the other levels. And it's a shame, because it's a really nice aesthetic, but it's only meant to teach you the mechanics, so it's not the kind of stage that's going to outstay its welcome. And here we are with the water. It's gonna show its head in a bit of this stage. I unfortunately have fallen into this pit of water, and you can't actually jump onto these platforms up here. You have to take the spring, which is kind of annoying, but you know, it's not terrible level design. It's just kind of one of those things where you're like frustrated by it just because, you know, it's a little bit of your time that you're wasting having to get back up onto these platforms. But overall, I would say this test stage is pretty well designed. Here we have the whole rising water with the blocks like we see in Chemical Plant, and I get through sections like this okay most of the time. They're not that difficult for me. You don't actually get out of the water at the top. There's still water above this little channel, and you have to get the air bubble right there so you can avoid drowning, which I would say the air bubbles are placed pretty nicely here, and as long as you're careful about it, you won't drown. There's a bunch of balloons under the water here too, which I think is kind of cool. You'll see them in the upper portion of this section. There's a whole bunch of different stuff in this water section that's stuff that I haven't seen done in water sections in games before, and it's pretty interesting to see how all these mechanics could work underwater, which is an interesting concept. So you'll see there's the balloons, and you can pop them, and I think the balloons might even let out air bubbles. I think they might have done this in the original game, because I know the balloons are in Carnival Night, which has a water section in the second stage, or the second act. But it's really cool. So you pop the balloon, and then I'm pretty sure it just releases an air bubble, which is a kind of a neat concept. So I think this is the end of the water section. So you'll see the rest of the stage. Oh, that looks like I had a spill there. And here we take this string. Here, there's a checkpoint. They're pretty generous with the checkpoints, which is nice. You can do a lot worse. And then we've got these conveyor belt things. They're just throwing literally everything at you, just so you can get some sense of what you might encounter in the other stages, or what you might encounter in player-made stages, which I think is a pretty good idea for something like this, where you will have a lot thrown at you at once. And here I'm trying to get on that spring at the bottom there. It's moving back and forth. I didn't realize that. So there's the end of the stage. Now we're going to go into Test Zone Act 2, which I personally think could have been a little bit better. It's basically trying to emulate, I think it's trying to emulate Collision Chaos from Sonic CD. And it's basically a giant pinball table, but there's like these glass things that you have to break in order to get anywhere. And my thinking was that you were supposed to get to the left and get out of the machine, but you're actually supposed to go up. And you'll see I completely missed the arrows saying so, and I fall out of the machine, which I thought was going to mean instant death. But you'll see when I actually do make my way out of the machine, the death plane is actually only underneath the main paddles at the bottom. If you land anywhere else outside the machine, you're fine, and you actually have to jump to avoid the death plane to get back into it. I don't know if that was intentional, but it makes things at least a little bit easier. You can see other players that are in the same server while you're doing your thing, so that can be a little bit distracting at times, but for the most part, they don't affect anything that you're doing. They just kind of are there. I think you can chat with them using the chat feature of Roblox, I've seen people do it. I didn't try to talk to anybody or anything while I was doing this. I just wanted to kind of experience this for the first time, and I wasn't really too worried about the people around me. So here we go, trying to get out of the machine, because I swear that's exactly where I thought I was meant to be going. Most of the time in 2D games, you are trying to go right to left or left to right. And there was plenty of resistance keeping me from getting to that side of the machine, so I was like, this must be the way I'm supposed to be going. The recording of the footage stopped there and I had to start a new clip, but you'll see that I've gotten as far because it's literally just the same playthrough with a different point in it because the clip changed. And I've almost made it to where I can get all the way to the left. I've broken all those glass things that were blocking my way. Now I just gotta get past some of the obstacles that stay put, and I'll be on the left. And you can see those arrows on the side, they were pointing up, and I didn't see them. And then I died because I hit the death plane. So this took me longer than I'd like to admit. Now I gotta start breaking everything all over again. It's back. And like I said, this zone I think was trying to do what Collision Chaos was doing. And Collision Chaos is by far one of the strangest levels from the classic games. I don't honestly know what exactly they were trying to accomplish. It's just, I mean, it's kind of collision-y and chaotic. That the title says all you need to know, I guess. And this is definitely in that same vein, I think. There I finally noticed the arrows, I think. And I'm like, oh, so this is not where I'm meant to go. But I think I avoid dying this time at least, so that's not too bad. Now we gotta figure out how to get up and out of the machine. Pinball stages can be good, they can be bad. They can be middle of the road. It's kind of just a matter of how well they are designed. I personally like some of the 3D pinball stages we've gotten. 2D ones can be fun, but some of them can also be very brutal. Bingo Highway from Sonic Heroes, that one gets me every single time. Every time I play it, I'm like, it's so intense, and I get tensed up, and I don't know if anybody else is like me, but like, when I'm doing something intense, even if it's just a Sonic game, where the mood is pretty lighthearted, I tense up, and sometimes I choke. But this isn't that hard, it's just a little bit cumbersome and a little bit difficult to navigate. And a lot of that is mostly due to these breakable things, because you gotta break them in order to get past them. And here I fell out of the machine again. So there I hit the death plane somehow. I guess just the left-hand side is safe out there. So you really gotta be careful if you manage to fall out. It's super annoying each time I have to restart this level. It's one of those things where it's like, I just got to where I was about to get out of here, and you know, then it's more like, oh, I'm doing it again. And that's kind of how I was feeling with this. And this wasn't actually the first time I'd gotten this far, because I beat the test stage on the original startup, and then I got to this stage and I lost all my lives and had to start over. So this is my second time dealing with this pinball stage, and it's like, I just want to get out of the machine. And I wasn't sure if there was going to be more test stages or if this was a 2-act situation. And all I knew was I wanted out of the machine, out of the pinball. I'm done with the pinball. I can see I'm starting to get closer to the top, and here I go bouncing around. I'm just like, just let me out of the pinball machine. I don't want to be here anymore. And thankfully the gold ring was right there. So I would say compared to the first test stage, this one seems completely like just out of left field. It's not really teaching you much of anything. It's just annoying. So then after the test stages, I get to the boss for the test zone, which is the first boss from the original Sonic the Hedgehog. It's Eggman with his wrecking ball, which sometimes I do well at this fight, sometimes I don't. It really depends on if I can get the timing down. It's definitely one of the easier fights from the franchise, but it's also one that if you aren't careful with what you're doing, you can make a minor mistake that leads to you losing all your rings and getting hit. But thankfully I got this one first try, which was nice. It's always a bit of a good feeling when you get the boss on the first try, even if it's one you've done a million times. And here we have the capsule releasing all the cute little animals. And then we move on to the first act of Green Hill Zone, which I'm not sure if this is actually Green Hill Zone 1 or if it's like their own rendition of Green Hill Zone. I don't think it's Green Hill Zone 1. It might be Green Hill Zone 2, or it may even be Green Hill Zone from Sonic Mania. I don't memorize the stages well enough to know. I just think that this is a decent Green Hill Zone stage. It's not too long, it's not too short. It's pretty much just a good time, and it incorporates elements from a lot of different Green Hill Zone places. So with that out of the way, I go into the second act of this zone, which ends up being a little bit more difficult than the first act. And also, for some reason, it's got Hilltop's color palette, but it's still called Green Hill Zone. So I'm like, what? It's really weird. And you'll see the water has been turned into lava, except for it's not actually classic Sonic lava. It's like classic Sonic water, but with lava coloring. So here I fiddled around with the menu and the different characters that you can be in this game, because there are more than just the Sonic 1 Sonic. You got Sonic CD Sonic, you got all the other Sonics, you got Tails, you got Knuckles, Amy makes an appearance, you got Metal Sonic, you got Rouge. I think you also have Shadow. It's really cool that they decided to put more than just the original classic cast in here. Here I am trying a custom built stage from somebody as Amy. I wasn't acquainted with her moveset at first, so a lot of this is me trying to figure out how to play as Amy. She has her hammer, and that's how you attack, is to throw your hammer. And I get a bubble shield, which is nice in a water level, but I think I lose it at some point because I ended up drowning, and you'll see what happens. So here we go down this little thing, and I lose my shield, of course, and I stop for a bubble because you need to breathe, and then I get hit by this, which takes some doing to get around. You have to jump onto the spikes to get up to these platforms. It's really a lot. So here I land on the spikes, land on the platforms, and then you see this thing, and this thing's gonna be the death of me. I get that checkpoint. That was a bad idea, because here I end up drowning, and then I keep getting killed immediately by this thing's spike balls. And I'm just like, who designs something like this? I mean, it's not a person who has experience with designing, I'm sure. I know I personally don't have any video game level design experience, but there are some things that you're like, how could you think that was a good idea? And that was one of them. It just seems like a cheap shot, you know? So then I played as Rouge back in the main game's stages, because I figured at least these would be relatively well done. And it was kind of interesting to play with the classic aesthetic and play as Rouge. She basically plays exactly like Knuckles would, and that's fine because she's always been kind of an analog for Knuckles. And it's a lot of fun to play as a character. It's like, it almost feels like you're doing something mischievous to play as a character that you wouldn't normally get to play as in a classic game. I know there are plenty of 2D fan games out there that include characters that were never from the classic titles, and some of them even include original characters. It's very interesting to see what you can find out there. You can find videos of people playing all sorts of games that fans have made, and it's really interesting. Some of them seem like they're pretty solid. I've never played a lot of them, so I don't know if they're actually as good as they look, but you know, it's a good aesthetic and everything. And Mania kind of made me give all of the classic titles a bit of a second chance, because I've never had the best experience with them previously, and thankfully Sonic Origins was a very good experience with the classics. I did admittedly play them in anniversary mode, and I also didn't get the good ending for any of the games except for Sonic CD, but I still had a good time with the whole thing, and it was a good thing to experience the classics that way. I think it was the best experience I've ever had with the classics personally, and so I think that there's a reason that people like them so much, and I can see the value in them, when before it was kind of like, well, it's never really been my thing. I kind of played them as a kid, but not as much as a lot of people did, especially because the only way I had to play them was the TV plug-and plays I had that were based on the Genesis, and they had Sonic and Sonic 2 and a few other Genesis games, but they didn't save any of your progress, and so I would get to like this first or second stage, and then I wouldn't get past that. So I've come a long way with the classics. It's been a bumpy ride, but I really like how things have shaped up, and this game kind of celebrates a lot of that. And it's not finished, but it's still pretty cool to kind of tune in and see what's going on in here. I continued to play as Rouge until a point where I got stuck and couldn't get out, which I think might be coming up here shortly. Yeah, there's like a spring in one of these pits, and I fall in, and for some reason, I don't know if it's just because of her hitbox or what, but I can't get out of the spring. It's like stuck me against a wall, between the wall and the spring, and I'm like trying to get out, and I couldn't. So at that point, I just ended up deciding to end the play session, because I didn't know what else to do, and I was kind of getting a little bit done with it, but it was still a good experience. So overall, I would give this game a try if you're interested in classic Sonic at all. It's not exactly like the classics, I don't think, but it's still a pretty good thing. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.